Hello and good morning to everybody. Hopefully, and Infrascale. I'm Tom Ruffalo. I'm the CEO of eSecurity Solutions, and I'm a CISA. What I like to do is introduce the topic with a couple of slides, and then I'm going to hand it over to Derek and let him do his presentation from the Infrascale perspective, and then at the end we'll have an opportunity to ask questions and handle any follow-up things. We might have a couple of polls in the process, and so hopefully you can participate in that as well. There we go. So, in thinking about disaster recovery, there's a lot of information out there, and you can substantiate. You can look at the evolution of disaster recovery, and you can look at the need, and you can look at all of the impacts and all the other stuff, and it's all really important. But if you look at the history of security itself, which is kind of another way to look at it, all the way from the 90s or even the 80s when malware was created and the attacks were on endpoints and servers, to having it evolve into hacking, which was one of the earliest threats, and then email phishing, social engineering, then more recently CEO fraud, spear phishing. I mean, these things are all disastrous. Ransomware probably was being the first thing that got small businesses' attention and realizing that they could be a target as well, as attacks are more commoditized now and available as attack kits for hackers and for criminals. And so as you look across here and you see all the different areas of attacks, and as it evolves moving forward, the one commonality in all this, number one, is that all of these attack methods are stackable. The methods that were used in the 80s and 90s are still being used, and they're still being used effectively. And they're being stacked on top of each other to provide complex multi-prong attacks, which really was what advanced persistent threats were all about. But even today, we're seeing complex multi-stage attacks. And the one commonality of defense against that really always has been backup and disaster recovery. And it really wasn't until the last 5 or 10 years, that we started getting into more sophisticated solutions that could back up, that could do more than just back up your files or back up your systems, and it would do it in a way that attempted to provide these kind of results. Right, number one, you need to have solutions that provide instant restore. Right, you have to be able to get your data and your systems up and running very, very quickly, and which means you need to be able to have your systems and your data backed up remotely. You have to be able to execute that and run it remotely from the remote cloud. You have to be able to do granular restore, because you've got people that lose files and make mistakes. And I'll tell you right, if it's the CEO or the CFO that just lost the file, that qualifies as a disaster, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be a flood that takes out your data. It's really the sense of urgency in your organization. Both systems and data have to be backed up. You've got to be able to continuously back up files. Otherwise, if somebody's working on something and they do something, that power goes out or they delete something, you've got to be able to replace that, and you have to be able to handle multiple file versions. And so you have to be able to go back 1 or 2 versions, because it was what I did last week that I really wanted, not what I did yesterday. You have to be able to back up the multiple sites, on-site and off-site. You have to be able to back up everywhere that your data is, right? Whether it be from a cloud application to a remote data center to on-site. You've got to be able to handle and roll back from ransomware. You need to make sure that your backup data itself isn't infected with ransomware. You have to have a method for dealing with that. You have to be able to protect against the likely and the unlikely disasters, not just the high-profile stuff. And ultimately, you need to make sure you don't lose your job because of something that happened. And so, security is insurance, and you just don't. I would say this is a lot more likely than an earthquake, and it happens all the time, and it happens in small degrees and large degrees. So we need to take it seriously. The tools exist now to really provide a good solution that addresses all of these requirements, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Just as an overview, eSecurity Solutions is a Orange County-based security solution provider that provides solutions to complex problems to its customers, business customers. Right? We provide advisory services, risk assessments, managed security, and projects, security projects. We focus on customers that are driven by compliance, because frankly, compliance is driving almost all customers now, whether it be your customer that's telling you need to be compliant with their regulations, or because the regulations are growing, like GDPR in Europe, or the new California regulation, which is similar to GDPR, which will affect everyone in California. And that we'll see that propagate across the U.S. Security products, we work with a bunch of leading vendors. Infrascale is one of our leading partners, and frankly, the only one that we do manage backup disaster recovery with. And lastly, we focus on helping customers manage security, and the security risk management process, right? From risk assessments to helping you define strategies, prevent threats, detect and respond to threats, train your employees, and then manage those solutions. And if you need to get a hold of me, I'll have this up at the end as well. But I also write a blog twice a month on security. We take security seriously, and we address a lot of topics that are important to our customers. So given that, I want to switch. I'd like to switch it over to Derek, and I am going to do that as we speak. Here we go. So hopefully Derek's screen won't show up here.
All right, we good? You see how ransomware beats your backups.
Yep, I see it.
All right, perfect. So Tom gave a great overview of the landscape, and it's absolutely right that the risks to businesses when it comes to their operational infrastructure have been at risk for a long time. But the recent change in strategies for the cyber criminal organizations out there to target SMBs has been a huge change for not just individual businesses, but for industries altogether. There's a lot of disruption at the moment when you see a single police force get taken over with ransomware that hits their evidence file server, and then all of a sudden the judicial system is all backed up. The city of Atlanta going out for upwards of a week, and they're still paying into not just updating their security and their systems, but the bill for the lost productivity and the delays that have happened because of that attack are still adding up today, and that attack happened months and months ago. So it's important to understand what we're facing, and that's what we're going to be going through today. It's going to largely be educational in terms of who's Infrascale, and then what are the problems that are posed to small and medium-sized businesses today, and what are the things you need to look for when you're trying to get to a point where you feel comfortable knowing that your IT team has the right tools for the job to protect your business. Probably the first thing we'll dispel is the idea of IT magic. The IT team, they're going to be brilliant people, well-educated, well-experienced, but if they don't have the right tools for the job, they're going to be very limited in their ability to offer proper services for you, especially when they really matter, when you're simply not operating. And that's really where Infrascale was born. The idea of taking services, both backup and disaster recovery, and I'll explain the difference in a minute, from what used to be only affordable for enterprise companies or small medium enterprise that have $500,000 to $1 million a year just to focus on security solutions. You don't have to do that anymore, and Infrascale is one of those reasons. We've leveraged our expertise in cloud computing and cloud software development to create affordable and simple solutions that anyone can have, and it's a big part of our mission to eradicate downtime and data loss for businesses of all sizes. And the importance of that is multifaceted, from saving lives when, with the major industries being healthcare, finance, legal, education, law enforcement. Lives are on the line when you're talking about the ability to get certain systems back up and running. And we had Hollywood Presbyterian in Los Angeles was shut down for a week, and they had to transfer thousands of patients to local hospitals. Those of you familiar with the area are going to know that trying to get around in LA is not an easy thing. And when you have thousands of people that need to be moved, and that has to be moved by ambulance, that can be a risky situation. So Infrascale's been around since 2011 and came off of the coattails of another company called SOS Online Backup that was one of the first to really coin the term in online backup. So the experience that Infrascale has is really been nearly 15 years now in the backup and DR space. We've been named as a leader in the disaster recovery as a service space by Gartner, which is a well-renowned analyst group, and kind of the litmus for what services you should be looking at. The thing for us that was very exciting about this ranking is that we're next to some major enterprise type vendors. So IBM and SunGard, those services are in the 6 figures per year price range. And with Infrascale, you're just a fraction of that. They have a separate critical capabilities report where they actually divide the vendor rankings based on environment complexity. And up through the SMB space, we're number 1 and number 2, and number 2 by just a sliver. And then even moving up into enterprise, we only dropped to number 6 out of 15. And that was really just because of the lack of support for certain enterprise hardware. So it's been a good move for us, and we've been instrumental in changing the market and making the availability of disaster recovery services to you all. So again, the mission: eradicate downtime and data loss. These are 2 separate problems, and they often come hand in hand. But data loss is just that. If your recovery solution is only designed to get you data back, if you talked about a downtime scenario with a backup solution, and backup is traditionally just getting data back, it would be like going to a restaurant and you order a coffee, and they bring out to you, instead of a coffee, they bring you some whole beans and a cup of hot water and say, enjoy your coffee, right? That doesn't help you drink your coffee. Just like recovering files doesn't help you restore operations to your business. That's the difference between DR and backup. DR is, we're going to bring you that full cup of coffee so you can get your caffeine fix right away. The cost of downtime across North American businesses is quite large, looking about 700 billion annually. And that's because downtime that's not planned, so different than just shutting down and going on vacation, is customers are expecting responses from you. You have leads that are being generated. You have revenue targets. You have your operating expense of paying employees, paying rent. All these things go into your costs of downtime. And it's important to understand what downtime means to you and your business, because that's going to determine the amount of money and time you should spend on putting together a solution. Everything's relative. Just like I'm not going to pay a $75 extended warranty for a $75 pair of headphones. I would absolutely pay a $75 extended warranty for a $500 pair of headphones if I were to be so brash. So everything's relative, and so understanding your cost of downtime is really kind of step 1 to understanding how to tackle protecting your business from going under because of these external threats. So I'm going to do a quick poll here just to get a gauge of, for those of you in the audience, how many of you understand your downtime? And generally this ranges from, we know it's not good, but we don't have a number. We have a rough idea generally because maybe you've been through some minor downtime events in the past, but it's not a figure that you are basing your completeness of a backup and DR solution or a business continuity solution. And then yes would mean it's calculated, you know exactly how much you have to lose in case of downtime, and that's why you're here today. Okay, great. We got about a quarter of you voted. We'll give it another couple of seconds to get in here. All right, up to 40%. Come on, guys, click the buttons. This will just help us know who we're talking to. All right, that'll be good. So I'll share the results here on the screen. So it looks like about a third of you don't know, but you know downtime isn't good. That's a good start. And then probably the most common situation we find businesses is that it's kind of the rough idea scenario, but it's not something that's formally assessed or formally managed to. You know, when you go to your IT team and you ask them, okay, you know, how's our business continuity plan? The answer shouldn't be yes, we have one. It should be yes, we have one, and we've limited it to X hours, something like this. And that's where you're going to get with with e-security. And it's often going to be based on the types of tools that they're going to be using. Let me close this. Okay. So back to the presentation. So downtime, you have a lot of causes, right? And you have natural disasters, which is where most people go when they think of disaster recoveries: fires, floods, hurricanes, this sort of thing. If you're in Southern California, this is almost never something that comes across people's minds because, as Tom mentioned, you know, short of the big one that's going to drop you all into the ocean, there isn't a lot of natural disaster concern. Even with the fires going on for the last 10 years in California, most of those areas are rather rural. So there hasn't been a lot of business impact to those, with the exception of, you know, some of the Santa Barbara fires and landslides and the Santa Rosa. But for the most part, the things that we really have to worry about are things that have no geography that makes you more or less susceptible to it. They have no seasonality like hurricanes or fire season. And it's things that you have to have as a normal part of your operation on a day-to-day basis. These are things that you can't just say, okay, you know, hurricanes are coming, let's get ready. It's something that affects everyone. And similar to the graphic that Tom had earlier, and, you know, a full business continuity solution is multifaceted. So, you know, traditionally security and DR or backup are separated, but they really shouldn't be. You know, you can't have a full business continuity plan if you have no way to regain business continuity, which is where your recovery options come in. So when you look at how to keep your business safe, it's important that you address your outer perimeter security layer. So what are things keeping the bad stuff out as much as possible? And then the next layer is your inner perimeter security for containment and detection. It's, you know, a big part that a lot of businesses miss because SMBs just statistically don't have good security solutions in place, is understanding how you were attacked and how your network was penetrated gives you the ability to improve those areas. Without proper inner perimeter security solutions, it's very difficult or just not possible to determine that. And so you just kind of have to take guesses of where you can improve things instead of knowing exactly how a certain malware or system got in. And then when it comes to resiliency and recovery, and this is the core part. So if you were building this out like a house, this would be the base. So you have your business continuity and disaster recovery option as, you know, the first most important thing to get in play, because things will go wrong, whether they're small or big, or somewhere in between. And your ability to recover is going to determine how smooth it could be when you regain operations and how much damages you incur. So you would start kind of bottom to top in this graphic. You get a backup and DR solution in place, then start putting some inner and outer perimeter security solutions in place. And then after that, and you get to a good baseline, then you can layer on top of it as you see fit. But there is a baseline, and the e-security team is going to give you their guidance into how to get there. In this poll we just did, so some of the big attacks that we might know from the news are, the WannaCry attack. This was big because it was unique in that it stole an exploit that was being used by the U.S. government, which was one of 18 exploits that were stolen and then sold in the black market. And this was really kind of the the flag that said, okay, the private hacker groups, the for-profit hacker groups that create exploits and then sell them to other cyber criminal organizations are having a resurgence. They had been beaten down quite a bit by joint efforts with international coalitions as well as just U.S. FBI and CIA forces to really kind of track down and arrest these people. And they went quiet for a little bit, but ransomware had became so successful starting in 2015 that they're back in force now and in high demand. WannaCry also set the record for the single largest cyber attack in history, which was previously held by the 2007 storm virus that came out of Norway. The thing about ransomware, a lot of people they ask, well, how much are they asking for? They don't ask for a whole lot. By design, the change in tactics of ransomware hitting SMBs was to get a small amount of money from a large audience or a large group of targets. So, which is contrast to the previous hacker philosophy of let's go after one big firm like Experian or LinkedIn or Sony, and we'll make a lot of money off of one hit. But then all of that work, their exploits, everything really only apply to that one business. Ransomware changed the game completely. Cyber criminal organizations are popping up all over the world just to target SMBs because it's easy. The ROI is very, very fast, and SMBs just aren't well equipped. So they're often put in a position of lose your data or pay the ransom because there isn't a good backup solution in place. Petya and NotPetya are interesting because these are more state-sponsored attacks. And this is indicative of a different thing to protect from, whereas the Petya viruses, they were state-sponsored attacks. Right now it's assumed to be Russia, and they were used to attack Ukraine, which they're currently in a war with, but it bled over into international businesses and organizations. Petya also used the same exploit, the Eternal Blue exploit that WannaCry did, but it also just got into networks by hijacking an automatic update of software. And so, it was a unique situation to look at and to see, this is a trend that we'll see propagated through the next phase of attacks. Is you don't even have to rely on phishing. It's just automated software updates to systems that you're using will actually or can actually penetrate the network. And then with a lot of these attacks, there was no option to even pay the ransom. They were really designed just to be disruptive. And so then you absolutely needed a backup solution in place, or you had no option to get your data back. Now, the challenge with ransomware, again, it's not the ransom, it's the downtime. When we look at the global risk assessment, which is put on by an international body, cyber attacks have continued a steady rise as the most likely and most impactful issues to the global state of economics today. And that's largely fueled by the change in use of crypto to have attacks like ransomware. So cyber attacks continue to be more and more important for us to defend against, both as individual businesses and as business communities. Some statistics on ransomware today. We're still waiting on some updated statistics from 2017, but from 2016, it was estimated that a business in North America was infected with ransomware every 2 minutes. By 2017, it was every 40 seconds. We should have an update for 2017 now, but I believe it's going to be relatively leveled out. About 30 to 40 seconds is what we're looking at. 72% of ransomware victims are unable to access their data for at least 2 days. 2 days doesn't sound like a lot, but also statistically, 80% of the businesses that go out of business for 3 days or longer, 80% of businesses that are down for 3 days or longer do not recover. And this is generally over the course of 12 months. So, a lot of these businesses within a year of being hit by ransomware, if they fall into that 72% bucket, 80% of those people just won't have businesses to go back to at the end of the year. The expected cost due to businesses due to cybercrime over the next 5 years is estimated to reach 8 trillion. It's a big number, but these statistics and estimates are usually quite conservative. Typically what we found, especially since the ransomware attacks started in 2014, 2015, is the estimates that we've been in the industry leading to and working with have been under what the actual numbers have been. So it's 8 trillion is a conservative estimate of what's going to impact businesses over the next 5 years. So all of this ramps up into, look, you have two options when it comes to having a secure IT kind of setup for your business. You need to have a rock solid backup and DR system to avoid both data loss and downtime, because the alternative is to be at the mercy of the ransomware criminals, or whichever variant or style of attack that has yet to come up does come up. But using crypto to lock people out of their systems, or better yet, to lock people out of the systems and then to make changes to data, these are things that are really quite problematic for businesses to adjust to if they don't have a proper backup and DR system. So when you get infected, what are you supposed to do? Typically you would remove the infected machine from the network to stop the spread, and then you work to figure out when you were infected and you roll back to a previous backup. It's really important to have trained technicians when it comes to ransomware, because not all ransomware variants operate the same. For instance, with WannaCry, if you would have left your machine plugged in and on, then you would have had a decryption tool that would work for you within about 4 days of that virus hitting the market. But there are other variants where you absolutely want to pull the plug immediately. So it's important to have a team that's with finger on the point of what type of variants are out there. When you get struck with something, do they know how to go figure out which variant it was? I've had a lot of teams that they're still, when they first get hit, it takes them a few days just to figure out what variant it was. There are fast ways to do this. It doesn't have to be that long, but you need a team that's going to be up to speed, and any security certainly does that. Now, the big things to look at when, the big fallacies that come with understanding the current market and the threats that are out there, especially when it comes to ransomware, are these 5. The lone wolf myth, the fact that they're targeting your business, small businesses, the fact that just having a backup is not good enough, what domain access does and how it operates throughout your network, and then when it comes down to recovery, even if you have a backup that's in place at the end, the speed of recovery could still be the last straw that brings your business down. So first, the lone wolf myth is, well, before I get started, if you guys have any questions or comments as we go through this, feel free to use the question function and go to meeting at any time, and then we'll stop at the end for some Q&A or address it as we're going if I see it. So the lone wolf myth is, this myth, and you hear this on news outlets that aren't specifically tech news outlets, and they'll have some slights at attackers that would make it seem like these are basement dwelling neckbeards that are just out there to disrupt business, still living at home with their parents. That's not the case at all. These are very sophisticated organizations. They operate like businesses. They have product management, they have development teams, they have schedules, they have roadmaps. They are continually looking at the market and ways to improve the success rates of their campaigns. There are still lone wolf, hackers out there, but for the most part, that's not the big cause or the big cause for concern. The cause for concern are these large organizations that are specifically targeting the SMB group to make money. One example I like to show is Spora, which is a variant of ransomware that is available in the black market for a very small amount of money. And one thing you'll notice in this screenshot is that it doesn't look like anything you've probably seen put on any main media outlet, because the screenshot doesn't have any skulls and crossbones, no crazy colors. It actually looks quite pleasant. It's quite easy to read. Obviously, it's developed by some foreign nationals because the dollar sign's on the wrong side of the place. But they spend a lot of time on the user experience here. And the importance of the user experience when it comes to ransomware is, if you attack somebody and you give them a very clear and easy path to get through the problem themselves without calling help, then you're going to increase your chances of collecting some ransom payments. So even here on the right side, this is a live chat support, and these chat agents are going to help you do everything from getting your Bitcoin account together, how to get Bitcoins, how to make the payment, and then once you get the payment, getting the decryption key, and they stick with you all the way through using the decryption key to getting your data. Now, this isn't true for all variants of ransomware. You have, the real crap ones and the real sophisticated ones, but the fact that this is accessible for a very small amount of money means, this is something that you can get from anyone. And I've heard great reviews from the support agents of these ransomware companies too, which is somewhat laughable, but it just brings home the point that this is not an individual lone wolf operation. This is a sophisticated business that just happens to operate on the wrong side of the law. Now, targeting your business, for a long time, really, for my entire career up until 2015, the small and medium business community was fairly safe as long as you practiced, safe browsing habits, don't answer personal emails. And if you're just doing your work, for the most part, you're not going to, get any malware on the machines. But the big shift was in 2016, where the SMBs became primary targets, specifically industrial services, so power, electric, those types of utilities, transportation, so like the Bay Area Rapid Transit System was hit last year, medical facilities, financial services, government agencies. These are important, and they're obviously good targets because unfortunately, as Tom mentioned, a lot of people are driven by compliance. So that's not unfortunate, that's good. The unfortunate part of compliance is that it's often misunderstood to be the maximum amount of effort you need to put into a security solution. Is just meet compliance and that's it. But compliance is put through government. By the time these minimum requirements are put out, and they are minimum requirements, they're likely out of date. And so using a compliance as a maximum policy is really just setting yourself up for some pain. And in fact, that's what's been happening. Is these organizations go in and they know exactly what the medical and the industrial and the financial services are going to have in place in terms of backup and DR plans. And so they can change their attack vectors, they can change the way that they're attacking and what systems they're attacking based on knowing that most people are just going to be using the compliance as a maximum. When you start going to targeting businesses, we saw big changes. So big changes in terms of how it spread. In the early days, it would be just a very slow rolling effect across an individual. And you may have a ransomware variant in your machine for a couple of months. That was 2013, 2014. As things progressed, and then once businesses became the target, the ransomware and the malware becomes relatively secretive and doesn't expose itself to your security solutions until it already has access to what it needs to strike. And then it happens very quickly. Within about 30 to 60 minutes, the ransomware variants out there today will have encrypted all of your major operational systems. So your file server, your email server, your domain controller, everything that you need to operate your organization. And one of the key components of that is your backup system. Ransomware product management and ransomware organizations know that the only option that saves people from paying the ransom when they get encrypted is that they have a good backup system in place. So locating and encrypting local, on-network backup systems is a primary objective. So once they have the backup, and then they also have access to your critical applications or your file servers, then they have you right where they need you. And the only way that they don't get paid is by, a business is saying, we don't need it, we'll just start over. And I don't know how many of you can do that, but my business certainly isn't one of those. So the way it works, in the early days, it was get under this user's machine. Still about 80% of ransomware attacks are propagated via phishing. So you're looking at your outer perimeter security and then your inner perimeter And then that individual user would get some sort of scary notice like this, and here's your skull and crossbone. Shifting to what we have today is end user is just the entry point. So the vampire is invited into the house. Now the vampire can start doing a little Mr. Sniffy and exploration across the rest of the house to see what else is there, spreading to different users. And then again, really what they're looking for is they're looking for access to critical systems, specifically your backups, before triggering. If you use file sharing, there are exploits in Office 365, OneDrive, all these sorts of systems. So they're also spreading from network to network and not just on a specific network. So you have to address all these components and how they attack a business. And then once they have the business data, then it's a ransom for the entire business and not just that user. So talking about local backups, there are a lot of systems out there where you get a branded piece of equipment, but maybe the data that's being stored is really just a well-packaged network attached storage. So if your administrator has access to go to where the backup files are being stored and play with those, so does the ransomware and any other malware that gets in your network. What you're looking for in today's environment is you need your local backup to be completely locked out. So with the InfraScale system, for example, it is an on-site appliance and the backups are stored there, and you can spin up machines on the appliance or just recover back to your production. But the administrator doesn't have any access other than through our software interface. The code is obfuscated with a 256 AES encryption, so there is no breaking it. Well, there's always breaking it, but the amount of time that would take by the time they got through it, it would be years and years down the line anyway, so it doesn't make sense. And then it goes off-site. So in today's environment, an on-site only backup solution can be okay as long as it's not going to be susceptible to getting ransomware with the rest of your data. The real key is to have an off-site backup solution, specifically when you're looking to recover, because if you just have an on-site backup, your recovery steps are going to be different. Which leads us to our recovery time. And this is really the important part about protecting your business. Downtime is the new focus point for businesses. How quickly can we get back up and running in the event of X, Y, or Z? And those are the metrics that you should be looking at to determine whether or not you're properly protected. Again, it's the difference between being served up some whole beans in hot water versus a cup of coffee with milk, sugar, and whipped cream and whatever other items you want on top. So do you have just the components that you can get back, or are you actually restored operationally? And the money that you're losing, the exposure to going out of business afterwards, increases exponentially for each day that you're down. And so most businesses, you should be kind of managing this on an hourly basis, and usually a couple of days will be fine depending on your operations. And you may have different SLAs or requirements based on the systems that you have. It's not going to be the same for getting an individual who's down is not nearly as significant to the business as a central system that all users rely upon to do their work. Just quickly, to reiterate the difference between a backup system that is designed to get you data back and to not lose data versus a disaster recovery system that's designed to restore operations. A backup system, including ours, we have backup NDR as part of our suite, is going to give you a recovery time for a single database even of about 4 to 5 hours. And that's assuming that everything goes smoothly from the beginning, that you don't have to rebuild a baseline of anything. You don't have to reinstall an OS every once in a while, but there's a lot of steps, a lot of variables, a lot of learning as you go through this process. So 4 to 5 hours is very hopeful. You're more likely to get an SLA that tells you the response time that they commit to, not necessarily the recovery time, because there's so many variables in place. Now with the disaster recovery system, you go into your system, you right click, you hit boot, and it's up and operational in the cloud within 15 minutes, and then usually within 2 minutes. And then the IT team can work on reconnecting that to your network so that users can continue doing business while a production recovery is planned in a more stable and less hair on fire type of situation. With a system like that, the recovery scenario and the recovery steps are going to be relatively the same no matter what. So there are very few variables to consider. It's something that can be tested quite regularly, and you will actually know how much time it's going to take to get back up and operational versus waiting for updates, right? If you expand this to an entire network, and this is a rather humble environment, right? About five roles. There's an order of operation in terms of how you need to recover these things. So you got to start with your domain controller, which is your DNS and your Active Directory services. Once those are configured and working, then you can start adding in your secondary roles. So your app server, your mail server, your database server, some testing involved. And then you can start plugging in your tertiary services like a web server, file server, these sorts of things. And then you have the fourth layer, which is to plug users into that system. So it's a lot of steps, a lot of discovery and variables during this time. A recovery of an environment like this could take days or even a full week. With our system, we built in a boot orchestration tool for your IT team to use. So this would be set up in the first days of installing the system. And what this does is it lets you drag and drop the machines, the order in which you want them recovered in the event of a site-wide, say ransomware attack, which generally are going to hit everything on your network. And gives you the ability to test this recovery scenario on a regular basis with a single click of the button. You just come up here and hit run. And then all these machines will start booting. You can put wait times in between to do those different customizations and checks. But this is going to allow a team like eSecurity to give you a much faster response time with more information as far as when you'll be back up and running. And it's simply predictable for them as well. Tom and I were talking about it, and I said, Tom, before you had Infrascale DR, what would you do if one of your customers, had a downtime event? How do you manage your staff? And he kind of said, well, before Infrascale DR, it was so risky, we simply didn't offer the service. But Tom, you have some comments on how this service has given you all the ability to provide this to customers, and how this has changed your perspective on what's a good service versus a bad service.
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy, first of all, our philosophy on security is that security is a science, and it's the combination of everything you do, and data backup or backup and disaster recovery, as I said, is probably the most important thing you have in your entire system related to security, because it literally can repair or allow you to recover from a whole host of other things that are driven by malware or hacking or any number of other things that destroy your data or infect your system or even business continuity issues, obviously, as well. So that whereas multi-factor authentication is super critical because you need to make sure people are the people that are logging into your system. This is I think probably more important. And so from our point of view, we work with Infrascale because Infrascale has got a system that does everything that you need, and also is I hate to say it, but it's affordable, but it's also the kind of system that can be where you can pay monthly for something rather than having to pay 3 years and buy stuff. They've actually designed a model where it is a service from the point of view of this. You figure out what you need to. It's scalable, and then you pay for it as you go, which is the right way to buy just about anything these days, and it certainly makes things a lot more easy to consume.
Terrific. Okay, so we have a few more slides left, and we'll open up the question and answer. This is a screenshot of something that we provide on our website. You won't find this anywhere else. This is a live. Well, this is not live. This is a screenshot. But on our website, you can find a live grid where we actually show the recovery times for all of our customers globally. So it doesn't violate any security principles because we're not showing any data. other than, when you highlight a big circle like this, it'll show, okay, there were 50 recoveries between May 18th and 19th, and they ranged between a minute 45 and 20 seconds. And we don't hide the bad things. So like, here's a red mark where, it took 2 minutes and this machine didn't recover properly. And that's good. The whole point of testing your recovery system is to make sure that it's working for you. For those of you that are around in the tape heyday, which still is alive and well in the enterprise market, more than 50% of tape recoveries failed. And the reason wasn't just one thing. It was because of a software issue or hardware compatibility issue, or the hardware failed, or your verification gave you a green light, the backup data was written, but there was some issue in the software, and software all has issues, and the backup file was unusable. And that's why we've launched things like a boot verification screenshot. So now Tom's team can actually schedule test recoveries on a regular basis. And rather than just saying, yes, we are able to download the data, it goes a step further, and it actually boots the machine to a point of login and takes a screenshot and say, see, the machine was able to be not only recovered, but put into an operational state. Here you go. And instead of that requiring a lot of man hours, which gets very expensive, and also means that it's going to happen less likely, it's all automated. So you just schedule this to happen, and now you have test recoveries on a regular basis so that you always know that that system's going to be there for you, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to have that level of comfort. We'll do this poll in a minute. I want to get through some of these slides, and then we'll do the poll and open up the Q&A. Bruce Schneier is a well-known security guru and professor in the United States, and he said this over and over during his tenure and in all of his blogs and his books is, look, when we talk about security, like we said at the beginning, it's often divided by people in the market as security is different than backup and DR. But he said the single most important thing any individual or company can do to improve security is to have a good backup strategy. And in that, of course, he means a good recovery strategy, because if you can't recover it, it's not a backup. And this has been true for as long as record keeping has been there, and businesses have been operable, whether it's by paper or digitally. Our solution guarantees we can boot any machine to our cloud in 15 minutes or less, and at a fraction of the cost. So when you look at backup systems and the technologies available, you have offsite tape backup, which is, when it comes to the tape storage medium, it's the cheapest storage you can buy. In terms of the operations behind having this system reliable and ready for you when you need it, quite costly. And it's also quite limited in what you can protect. The ability to get off-network users is not there. And it's certainly not going to be fast, right? Tapes are not fast, they're cheap. And speed of recovery is critical to avoiding downtime. Cloud backup came in later, and that was a little more expensive, but much better coverage, more reliability. Appliance backup, same thing. But all these backup systems, they still have long recovery times because they're designed to prevent data loss, not to avoid downtime. Once you get into the DR side of the world, it becomes very cost prohibitive, and I should probably change this line to really have a big curve. But the reason cold site DR, warm site DR, and hot site DR isn't a service that everyone has is because it's expensive. The difference between backup and DR is that DR has a recovery site ready for you so that you don't have to go out and buy hardware, you don't have to install operating systems and do all this work. And that's not cheap. That's hardware, that's monitoring and management on a regular basis. For a hot site DR system, you're looking at the millions of dollars per year to have something like that ready for you. And so if you're measuring downtime in minutes, that's where you go. What InfraScale DR does is we leverage the cloud as your recovery environment, and we do it in a way that can be affordable. And we found that when we are replacing older tape systems, that all in all, total cost of ownership, the regular monitoring and management, we end up being a lot cheaper than even tape systems. It's just hard to explain that to your accountants when it's mixed between CapEx and OpEx. But all costs included, the DR system is giving you a near warm site DR failover capability at the price of what's typically less than what your traditional offsite tape backup system and process would be. A typical business has server backup and failover for their primary apps, and then all of their remote offices, workers, laptops, desktops are kind of put on the onus of the individual working those things to stay safe. You know, hey, you better log into the VPN to sync to the server, or you're going to lose data. That's not a good strategy because we know that's not going to happen so often. Then you add in hosted applications. These are also exposed. Infrascale has a solution for all of these versus having to go to multiple products and multiple vendors. This is important for the team responsible to recover because you want to be able to go to one person or one organization to get answers for the entire recovery and not have to deal with multiple support systems, multiple workflows, none of which are talking to each other. So with Infrascale, we have cloud application backup to hit Office 365, hosted SharePoint, hosted Exchange, OneDrive, those sorts of things. Then you have your Infrascale DR to hit your on-site critical systems and to really remove that downtime risk. And then you have cloud backup, which can ensure that your users, where they're creating data on their machines, you're not at risk of losing that data either. So it gives you a full end-to-end solution as far as, we're not going to protect one part of our business and then leave the other parts exposed simply because we don't want to manage that many vendors or the solutions are simply too expensive. What's also nice about the system and that we've grown up from a file and folder backup to a full DR solution is that typically when you look at the DR solutions of old, and they're still around today, they do full site-wide recovery quite well. But their ability to handle accidental deletion of an email or individual files or software issues, like occasionally you update Windows or any piece of software and maybe there's an issue. Handling those micro disasters is not exactly in the wheelhouse, and you often would have to go through a much larger recovery process than necessary. With our system, it's the difference between right-clicking and booting to the cloud, or right-clicking and exploring a machine and then searching for a file and then pushing that to an individual. So the way that it works with our system in place that allows a lot of tech teams to be more effective and efficient and provide better services to their customers without having a huge price tag on it is that flow exactly. So end users are working, suddenly they can't work anymore because of, name the issue. The IT team can now go to the Infrascale system and immediately recover and virtualize the machine as it was running previously and restore operations for the users. This can happen within a couple of hours of the alert. Once the operations are restored, then the tech team can take a minute to investigate what happened and properly rebuild the network. One of the big problems that I've noticed in the 10 years I've been in backup and DR is you often hear techs say, God, whoever set your network up before didn't know what they were doing. And the previous tech is always that same guy or gal. The reason is oftentimes techs are put in a position to do things the quick way instead of the right way because they don't have a way to end downtime that's separate of doing a production recovery. And then they never get the time to go back and do it the right way. This system allows the techs to have the tools to end the downtime as quickly as possible and then to properly rebuild the production environment. And this is a really critical time. Oftentimes this is when you're going to be looking to upgrade to newer operating systems, switching from hardware systems to virtual. These sorts of migrations are often happen around the times that machines fail. Then we have a case study, and then we'll open up the Q&A. So with the tale of two universities, we had the University of Virginia and the University of Calgary. The University of Calgary was hit by ransomware, and it took them down for about 10 days. The way that they went through the recovery was they had tape systems in place and they were meeting compliance. It took them 3 days to go through the recovery from the backups they had. And what they found was that they simply didn't have enough of the data they needed to avoid paying out the ransom. And then they needed to set up a Bitcoin account and get some cryptocurrency so they could pay the ransomware people. That was another few days. They got the encryption key, then it was another few days to actually get things back online, and they didn't recover everything. So it was all in all about 10 days of downtime, and I believe it was 10,000 Canadian dollars that they paid out. Now, what was really nice is they went public with this experience. This was 2016, so businesses were still pretty secretive about being hit by this, which is a problem for the market, because then people aren't aware of what we need to do to stop it. Ellen McCree read the report and realized, holy cow, I have the same system in place. I need to change things. She found Infrascale and she got our system set up. And within 60 days of getting our system set up, her department, which was the Alumni Association, was hit with ransomware. And it came in the form of a spoofed scanned document. So it looked like it came from their Rico printer. I'm not sure if that was the brand, but that's just the brand I'm using. But it looked like a spoofed email or a spoofed scan document that came from somebody internally in the organization from their Rico scanner. So how many people would just open that up? A lot. And that's how it spread across the network. She said that she didn't even break a sweat because she had already tested the system so many times, because other techs in different departments or in different schools wanted to see it in action. And so she went in and she was able to restore complete operations and restored all data within an hour and a half. And she attributed about half an hour of that to waiting for administrative approval to push the big red button. So we said, hey, that's part of your recovery process. That still counts. Sorry, it's not 1 hour, it's 1.5. And she said, fine. But that's the way it works. And that's the difference. You have a good system in place with the right tools for your tech team, and your business is only down for an hour and a half versus 10 days and $10,000 paid out. And there, we'll put up the last poll. If ransomware hit your business today, what's your confidence level of being able to address that? Have you tested against this particular scenario? What was the time? Tell us what you're at. Close but no cigar. Looks like we got about half yes, half no. Nobody in the middle category. But we're only about 20% voted. So vote in there, and then we'll start looking through questions, and I'll hand it back to Tom to finish us up.
All right. Yes, thank you, Derek. That was really great. Every time I see that, I learn something. I wanted to mention one other thing. I assume you can see my website up at the moment. I have a speaking event coming up on the 28th right here which is on our website under events on the 28th of this month in Irvine. So if
share button there real quick.
Oh, can you see? Oh, wait, hang on. Do I have to push another button? Security or it should be. What are you looking at right now? My slide?
Just the opening go to meeting slide on go to webinar.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. How do I get that up? All right. Well, apparently I can't make that show properly. I don't know why. But anyway, if you go to our website under events on the 28th of this month, I'm doing a 1.5 hour event at Webster University, and it's sponsored by Webster University, ISACA, and ISSA, and the topic is on the evolution of security. So I've done a bunch of research on security, on the threats, and on the responses over time. And I drew some pretty interesting conclusions from that, and I wanted to present that to a fairly large group. So they're even streaming it to their main headquarters in St. Louis. So if you're interested in coming, I think Allie's going to do an email to everybody that's local so that you can sign up. You can also go to our website under events, and you can click on, this is the event right here. It's on the 28th. And you can click on it, and that leads you also to a sign-up page. So that actually, I just want to make you aware of that. The other thing is, in terms of follow-up to this event, Ideally, my contact information will be up on the screen. I'm not sure what's showing at the moment. Hopefully, my last slide is showing up. And but in any event, we will follow up with you, or you can also follow up with us. Most of you know how to get a hold of us, and I am absolutely certain we will send you an email or call you and see if there's any way we can help you. I think you would agree that Infrascale has a great solution. We found them to have one of the most complete solutions, and also with the right business model around it, which I think is important. We can help you manage it. You can manage it yourself. But either way, we think that's the right solution for companies, and it's something that you should get serious about. And it plugs a whole bunch of holes, and as he showed you, it allows you to recover from wherever your data is, which is important because your data is increasingly scattered into the ether now. In terms of I don't know if you can see the.
I think you need to push the play button, Tom, on the top left, which says show, and then because right now we're just seeing the main screen for the webinar.
How about okay?
It says waiting. Waiting to view screen.
Got it.
Oh, it should be showing now.
Over there.
That's that slide, and then the other screen that I had. That's my motorcycle. Let's see. There's the web page. I assume you can see the web page now. Yes, you can. Okay, so there's the event page on our website if you want to go sign up for that. And then lastly, on the poll, as he's pointed out, the results were primarily 40% no, 40% yes, 20% needed a cigar or could not find a cigar, or it was close but no cigar. Okay. Anyway, that does show that there's a lot of divergence in where people are. If you're in that 60% that doesn't have it knocked, then we'd love to talk to you. And if you are in the 40% and your systems are getting older, or maybe you have some questions, we'd love to talk to you as well. So thank you all for attending. Sorry we ran over by 5 minutes here, and appreciate your time, and look forward to talking to you guys all soon again. Thank you.